Hello YouTube fam, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name's Tina and I make videos on lifestyle, home, and DIY projects every single week. If you're watching this the day it goes live, I want to wish you guys a happy Sunday and I hope that you had a wonderful weekend. My weekends have been pretty busy making DIY videos, but I have been trying to find time to go outside and enjoy nature. So last weekend we got to go to the beach and hopefully this weekend I'm doing something fun. Today's video is all about DIY wall art, so we're going to be creating some paintings. Creating your own DIY art is such an inexpensive way just to switch up the art on your walls. And in this video, I'm going to be sharing a couple of hacks, and these are all pretty easy and very affordable to do, so I hope that you guys like them. And before we jump into the first project, don't forget to like and subscribe down below. So for the first project, I actually need to grab something that's in the background right now, so let me go get it real quick. Please don't rip off the paint. Oh, this is dusty. I've had this piece of art hung up in my bedroom for quite a while now, so it's time to switch it up. This project is actually inspired by you guys because I had a couple of people DM me this same exact project, so I took that as a sign that I need to try it out for myself and show you guys how it comes out. As much as I love this print, I am not sad to see it go, so let's go ahead and jump into the project. Hello from VoiceOver Tina. To get this project started, I'm going to remove everything from the frame. And for our design, we're going to need a line drawing to trace over it. So of course, I wanted to do a simple line drawing of a monstera plant, so I'm using my iPad to do that. My absolute favorite program on my iPad is Procreate, so I'm using a photo of a monstera leaf underneath to create a contour line drawing, so it's going to look like one continuous line. There are very similar designs to the one that I'm creating, but I wanted to create an original one just to avoid any copyright issues. So if you guys would like to use this image in any of your projects, I'm going to have it linked down below. And you can definitely create any type of line drawing for this project. The version that I saw actually used a face line drawing, but you could also do a scenery or use shapes or even a word or quote. Whatever design you'd like to use, just go ahead and print it out. So I'm taking the glass from the frame and I'm placing that right on top of our design, and I'm going to ensure it is exactly where I want it to go. So the perfectionist in me just couldn't help but whip out a ruler just to make sure that everything was spaced out evenly. And for this design, I'm using an oil-based paint marker. This one is from Sharpie and it's one of my favorites. And to help avoid getting fingerprints on the glass, I'm going to place my hand on top of a napkin, and with the marker, I'm just tracing the design underneath. When it comes to paint markers, you want to make sure that you work nice and slow, and it's totally okay if the design isn't perfectly aligned with what's underneath, as long as it's pretty close, and you'll see that I kind of go off a little bit, but I'm adjusting it as I go. A couple tips I have with paint markers is to constantly pump the tip so that you have an even flow of paint coming out the marker. So you'll see that I'm using a scrap piece of paper on the side to do that. And if you mess up, don't worry, you can go ahead and use acetone to clean it up and start all over again. So this is looking pretty good. I'm going to go ahead and let it sit on the side to dry. As for the background, we're going to take some burlap, and I'm cutting that into the same exact size of the back of the frame so that it fits perfectly. This project is pretty inexpensive and was basically free for me to create since this burlap is left over from a previous project and I already had the paint markers on hand. Now we're placing the glass right onto the burlap, and you can either leave it with the paint on the outside or in the inside of the frame. Just make sure that if you flip it on the inside, it's going to be mirrored. And now all we have to do is put it back into the frame and our first project is done. How gorgeous does this piece look? This project took minimal supplies and such easy techniques to create such a beautiful piece of art that looks really high end. And the best part is you can easily wipe away the design and create another, or you can reuse the frame any way you'd like, and I am completely obsessed. Moving on to the next project, I'm going to show you guys how to upgrade your canvases. So here I have a basic canvas, and I like to buy this in packs, so usually they're pretty inexpensive. This is your basic 11 by 14 canvas, and I want to show you guys how exactly I got the texture in that painting right behind me. It really does take it to the next level, so let's get to painting. So first things first, we're going to add on tons of texture to our plain old canvas. To do this, I'm taking some tissues and I'm separating the layers so that it becomes a one-ply piece of tissue. And if you don't have any tissues around, you can also use toilet paper or even paper towels to do this project. Then I'm just going to rip these into smaller pieces and also giving these a little bit of a jagged edge. With some Mod Podge and a foam brush, I'm going to cover the surface of the canvas, and I'm doing this a little bit at a time, and you can also take the Mod Podge and dilute it with water, but I also found that using it as is worked great as well. Now we're going to take our tissues and we're going to place that right over the glue and press it down, and you're going to notice already that you start to get a really nice wrinkling, and for this part you can use your hands or even a clean foam brush to spread that out just to make sure that the edges are glued down. Once we're on our next piece of tissue, you want to make sure that the edges are overlapping. This is going to help make it look more seamless, but I find that since it's so wrinkly, you really can't tell when one piece starts and one piece ends. And essentially, we'll be repeating this process layer by layer until the entire canvas is filled. This is a really easy technique that's going to give us so much texture, and it's also very similar to the painting that I DIY'd above my bed. And I also used a similar technique when I created really cool spell books for Halloween. And if you guys missed that project from last year, you definitely need to check it out for your decor this year. I made it with just items from the Dollar Tree, and it's still one of my favorite projects. So as you can see, this process just takes a little bit of finessing, and there really is no right or wrong way to do this. I only use about one piece of tissue to cover this entire canvas, but this is totally going to depend on the size and if you want to add more layers on top in case you miss any spots. Creating this extra texture just adds some depth to your painting, and I don't know if it's just me, but it also feels a bit more expensive looking in comparison to a flat canvas. So I just wanted to highlight this technique and share it with you guys because you can use it under any piece of art to create some more interest. So I let that dry down completely before moving on, and then I'm gonna go in with a layer of gesso right on top of the tissue paper. This step is totally optional, but it gives our piece a nice base layer to work on top of. And since this is still the background, I'm trying to avoid any harsh brush strokes that go in one direction, so you're gonna see that I'm brushing this out in every direction. For the background, I'm using the color Unbleached Titanium, which is a nice neutral and a true beige color. And again, I'm using a nice big brush for this, and I want to make sure that the color looks like it's a part of the texture. So I'm making random brush strokes all around and brushing it right into the canvas. Moving on to the design, I'm going to water down some white acrylic paint, and this is going to help sheer it out a bit. With my favorite fine tip brush, I'm just going to draw on an organic curvy line, and I'm also adding loops in the line and just wavy patterns, and this is going to give us some nice freeform shapes. And as I'm creating this line, I'm moving my hand in a clockwise direction just to make sure that my line is going to connect at the end, and this is going to give us one big shape. And after I was happy with this, I went ahead and just marked off the different shapes that I'm going to color in. And generally, I'm coloring in every other shape to create some negative spaces and cutouts without paint. And all you need to do now is to color it in, so I'm going to use a larger brush here to do that. And since our paint is watered down, this is going to add in some extra dimension into the larger blocks of color. This project was inspired by this print that I saw from the Poster Club, and there's just something about it that I was really drawn to, and if you guys like this one, I will also link the original down below so you guys can check it out. Even though this design is really flat, the textured tissue just creates so much dimension. It really makes such a difference, and I can totally see myself continuing to use this technique for future wall art pieces. And for our last project, I'm going to grab yet another piece that's in my background. I specifically made this piece to cover a circuit panel. So this is covering up a big eyesore, and as you guys can tell, it is very neutral and warm tone. But I thought it'd be fun just to flip it over and transform it just so that we have a 2-in-1 project. As you guys can see, this piece is of a sunset, and it was inspired by Urban Outfitters, and I found another piece that is almost identical to the inspiration of this one, and I think it'll work perfectly if we put it on the back side here. I think it'll go a lot better with the rest of the room, so let's see how this turns out. If you missed my video on how I made this wall hanging, be sure to go back and watch it, but essentially I took a rug from IKEA and I recreated an Urban Outfitters sunset design by cutting it, painting it, and adding a dowel on top. Now for the other side, I was inspired by another Urban Outfitters design, but this time it's a moon design, which is kind of perfect since you can flip the hanging back and forth for 2 different designs. So as you can see, I found the middle of the hanging and I'm using a bowl to trace a circle. Then I'm measuring about 1.5 inches down and I'm tracing the bowl again, but this time it's only going to be half of the circle to represent a half moon. And after that, I'm going to move down another 1.5 inches and I'm creating a crescent moon shape. So I went ahead and just marked a line right under that initial curve, and then I'm moving my bowl down to create the crescent. And from there, we're going to mirror that on the other side. So here's how it's looking all sketched out, and I'm going to go ahead and paint the center, and I'm using a mustard yellow. This step is totally optional, but it's also super helpful just to disguise any gaps that you might have in the next step. And for the rest of the phases, I'm using a black paint and I'm just roughly painting in the shape. It's totally fine if it's not perfect since most of it is going to be covered up anyways. I'm taking some yarn and I'm measuring out a lot more than I think I need. Essentially, I'm going to have 3 strands and I'm going to tie it together and then braid them. And as I was braiding it, I wanted to make sure that it wasn't too loose, especially since we're going to lay it down onto the hanging. With my black yarn, it is quite a bit thinner than the yellow one, so I actually doubled it up and then cut out 6 strands. Then I am braiding it with 2 pieces of yarn per strand, and this is going to help make the braid a little bit thicker. So now we have a whole bunch of braids, and the next thing to do is to glue it onto each of the shapes. So to make things easy peasy, I'm using a hot glue gun, and I'm going to start with the center. After pressing and holding it down, I'm going to cut off the knot at the top, and then I'm going to overlap it the next row around the edge for a more seamless look. And you're basically just going to follow the braid around in a circle, and once we get to the end, I'm going to lift up the previous layer and then I'm going to tuck it right underneath so that you don't see the edges. I'm repeating this process with the black yarn, and I found that for these it was a bit trickier since we're doing a half round shape, so the black paint underneath really helped hide some of those gaps in between. And since the other side was just a flat hanging with paint, this is a great way to add some dimension and a bit of a cozy element with the yarn. When I got to the crescent shape, I actually glued it from the outside in just because I was afraid it wouldn't get the right shape. So I think this was working fine, but it did build up a little bit more than the other ones, so that's definitely something to keep in mind. And when I did get to the end to the other crescent shape, I tried going from the inside outwards, and I really did not like the way that this was looking at all. So before the glue hardened, I ended up just ripping it off and then redoing it by gluing the outside edge first. To finish this off, I'm covering up some of the edges with more of the black braided yarn, and this is going to conceal some of those raw edges. Since this is the backside of the original wall hanging, this stuff was definitely necessary, but if you're starting this project from the beginning, this is totally optional. And even when it comes to the bottom, I would also suggest to create some black fringe to go along with the rest of the design, but since there's already fringe there, I'm just going to keep it as is. I am loving how this project came out. This works really great with all the black accents in my room. I'm definitely a fan of anything lunar related, so this design is perfect, especially since it is 2 tones. And now I have a day and night version of this reversible wall hanging, and it was just so simple to make. I hope you guys enjoyed those projects and found inspo from them. As always, I would love to know which one was your favorite. I'm really happy with all the pieces because I feel like each one of them has a layer of texture to them, which is something that I really enjoy and want to tie into my space. So let me know your thoughts below, and if you guys were inspired by any of these projects, make sure to tag me over on Instagram. I also post on there every single day. And of course, I could not end this video without sharing some of your wall art, so here they are on the screen. Thank you guys so much for sharing your creativity with me. It's honestly the best notification and always puts a smile on my face, so thank you guys so much for continuing to share that with me. And that's it from me today, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Stay inspired, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!